Welcome back to HR232 Organizational Behavior. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 11 on leadership. So, our learning outcomes for today, well, we hope to contrast leadership and management. Then we're going to summarize the conclusions of trait theories of leadership. Then we'll identify the central tenets and main limitations of behavioral theories of leadership. We're going to assess contingency theories of leadership by their levels of support and contrast inspirational and responsible leadership. From there, we'll identify the leadership roles available to non managers, define authentic leadership, discuss the requirements of ethical leadership, then we'll define servant leadership, and finally identify the challenges to our understanding of leadership. So we start off with what is leadership? And leadership is the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of a vision or set of goals. And sources of influence for leadership, they may be formal or not. So, formal leadership, that's via position in an organization. The CEO is the leader of the organization, but that's a formal leadership. A variety of people can be called on to perform leadership roles within an organization, though, and not all of them are formal. Many of them are informal, and that's known as non sanctioned leadership. And that's the ability to influence that arises outside the formal structure of the organization. And it may be as or more important than formal influence. So that's if employees who aren't in a leadership position take on leadership themselves. So maybe that is mentoring a newer employee on how things are done within an organization, or coaching employees on how to do tasks. These are non-sanctioned leadership examples. And in terms of leadership, organization needs strong leadership, but they also need strong management. And there's a key difference between leaders and managers. Leaders look at the overall picture. They need to challenge the status quo, create visions of the future, and inspire organizational members to achieve those visions. So that's a leader's job, as overall, all encompassing, trying to make sure the status quo doesn't stay the way it is, that an organization is constantly changing and evolving. And they need to be able to inspire organizational members as well. Managers, on the other hand, managers are needed to formulate detailed plans, create efficient organizational structures, and oversee day to day operations. So, managers do a lot of transactional um, functions. They're the ones that might sit there and create schedules for who's working when, making sure we've got enough employees at the critical time. They're the ones who are going to delegate tasks to employees to make sure the day to day stuff gets completed on time. And so managers are essential to an organization as well. So leaders, they're looking at the overall vision, the big picture. Managers, they focus on the day to day tasks to keep the organization running efficiently and smoothly. Leadership as supervision. Well, there are three general types of theories when we talk about leadership as supervision, and we're going to explore all three of these. We'll first start with trait theories, which look at, are leaders different from others? Are they born with a specific set of traits that set them apart? Then we'll look at behavioral theories. Do leaders behave in particular ways? And are there certain behaviors associated with good leadership? And then finally, contingency theories, which looks at, does the situation matter for effective leadership? In other words, given different types of situations, What type of a leader is needed to be most effective? So we start off with trait theories. And trait theories are theories that consider personality, social, physical, or intellectual traits to differentiate leaders from non leaders. It's not very useful in all the research on trait theories until it's matched with the Big Five personality framework. We'll talk about that more in chapter 2. But what was found from the studies on trait theories of leadership was certain leadership traits emerge consistently in good, effective leaders. Number one is extroversion. Leaders tended to be outgoing, extroverted types. Number two was conscientiousness. So, good leaders tended to keep their employees in mind and actually care about their employees as well. So, they would listen to their employees and help out where they could, help their employees out where they could, help them reach their goals. The third leadership trait was openness. So, good, effective leaders are open to the unknown and open to change. And that is critical, especially in today's day and age. And finally, emotional intelligence. It was found that effective leaders all had a good understanding of emotional intelligence. Now, here's the other thing: traits can predict leadership, but they are better at predicting leader emergence than effectiveness. In other words, we can identify people that have these traits, and if they have these traits, then that could predict leader emergence. But it doesn't mean that they will actually use those skills in a leadership position or that they'll be effective as a leader. So it just identifies those that have a better chance at being a leader. Now, if we switch gears to behavioral theories of leadership, these are theories proposing that specific behaviors differentiate leaders from non leaders. Now, if you ask what's the difference between trait theories of leadership and behavioral theories of leadership, well, trait theories say that leadership is inherent, so we must identify the leader based on his or her traits. Traits can't be changed, they're something you're born with. That's what trait theory believes. Behavioral theory states that leadership is a skill set and can be taught to anyone. So we must identify the proper behaviors to teach potential leaders. So basically, what they're saying is hey, leadership is mostly behavioral based, behaviors can be taught. So we need to identify the behaviors of effective leadership and then teach people who want to become leaders about those behaviors. So, when we look at important behavioral studies on leadership, the first one was Ohio State studies in the 1940s, and Ohio State found two key dimensions of leader behavior. Initiating structure was the first one. So, a leader high in initiating structure, someone who assigns followers particular tasks, sets definite standards of performance, and emphasizes deadlines. So, once again, we're getting into that task oriented side of things where they're really good at directing the day to day. But the other key dimension was consideration. Leaders high in consideration help employees with personal problems. They're friendly and approachable. They treat all employees as equals and express appreciation and support for them. So, those were the two key dimensions that really distinguished good leaders from less effective leaders. Really good leaders were found to have these two behaviors: really good at initiating structure, really high in consideration. Now we fast forward to the 1950s, and the University of Michigan conducted a study as well on behavioral leadership, and they also came up with two key dimensions of leader behavior. Number one was leaders are really effective leaders are employee oriented. That emphasizes interpersonal relationships and is the most powerful dimension. So, being employee oriented was the most powerful dimension when it came to leadership. The other key dimension was production oriented, which emphasizes the technical aspects of the job. And if we go back to the Ohio State study, we had initiating structure, which was very high in task related behaviors, and then consideration, where we take our employees into consideration. And it's very similar to what the University of Michigan found. So, what we have here is validation for the Ohio State study. So, these two key dimensions of leader behavior seem to prevail throughout good behavior or good leadership behaviors. Finally, we go to contingency theories. And does the situation matter? And so what we looked at here in contingency theories was okay, leadership traits and leadership behavior are all great, but leaders are going to face a lot of different situations. So, what happens, or what do we have to focus on with different situations? So, contingency theories stress the importance of considering the context when examining leadership. We're going to do that with three different theories here. We're going to first look at Fiedler's contingency model. Then we'll look at Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership. And finally, path goal theory. So when we look at Fiedler's contingency model, well, it basically said effective group performance depends on the proper match between the leader's style and the degree to which the situation gives control to the leader. And they used something that was called the least preferred coworker questionnaire to determine whether individuals were primarily interested in good personal relationships with coworkers and were thus relationship oriented, or if they were more interested in productivity and thus task oriented. So if someone said they least enjoyed working with a coworker who was very relationship oriented, then they were probably more interested in productivity than good personal relations. So it was a way for Fiedler to kind of go and figure out uh, who employees least liked working with, and in terms of what type of leadership style they were interested in. So, Fiedler's contingency situations, well, Fiedler looked at three different situations. He looked at the leader member relations, and that's just the degree of confidence, trust, and respect members have for their leader, and ranked it as either good or poor. The second contingency situation was task structure, the degree to which jobs are structured. Are they highly structured or really have low structure to them? And then finally, position power. And that's just the degree to which the leader has control over power. So, hiring, firing, discipline, promotion, salary, etc. And that was rated as strong or weak. And from here, Fiedler created 8 different situations that managers or that leaders could face. One other key assumption was Fiedler assumed that an individual's leadership style was fixed and could not be changed. So, when we look at the results here, this is what Fiedler came up with. He took those three characteristics that we're looking at and rank them. So leader member relations, either good or poor, task structure, high or low, and position power, strong or weak. And he looked at all 8 scenarios and figured out which type of manager is most effective, or which type of leader, sorry, is more effective given the situation. And here's what we find: situations one, two, and three, a task oriented leader is the most effective. All of a sudden, we get to four, and it could be either task or relationship oriented. A good mix of both would really help there. Five and six, a relationship leader is going to be more effective in those situations. Seven, once again, we're starting to get into either or. And then in situation eight, once again, we're back to a task oriented leader being more effective. So, situations one, two, three, seven, and eight required a task oriented leader. Situations 4, 5, and 6 required a relationship oriented leader. And since Fiedler stated that an individual's leadership style is fixed, the only ways to improve leader effectiveness is to either change the leader to fit the situation or change the situation to fit the leader. Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership took a different stance. They actually focused, instead of on the leader and the situation, they focused on the followers. And in explicitly, they looked at follower readiness. So what they stated was followers can accept or reject the leader. Effectiveness depends on the follower's response to the leader's actions. So, in other words, a leader could be great, but if the followers reject the leader or don't follow them, the leader is ineffective. So, that's why they focused on follower readiness. And readiness, they said, was the extent to which people have the ability and willingness to accomplish a specific task. It's an intuitive model that does not get much support from the research findings, and part of that was because it's very difficult to measure. So, here's what we found. If a follower was able but unwilling, or followers were able but unwilling to do something, then the leader needs to use a supportive and participative style to get them on board. So, this means that followers have the skills to do the task, but they're reluctant to do it for one reason or another. So in this situation, the leader is trying to be very supportive. They're trying to get the employees to participate in the problem solving situation and trying to build support for this change in order to get the followers to become willing as well. So this is participation. If the followers are both able and willing, so they have the skills and they want to do it, then really we can take a bit of a hands-off approach or a laissez-faire approach. So in this case, you're just delegating the work out to the employees. They have the skills and they have the drive to get it done. So delegating is all you need to do in that situation. If the followers are unable but willing, so in this case, they may not have the skills to do it, but they're willing to try, they want to do it, then the leader needs to display high task orientation and high relationship orientation. So, this is what we call selling. The leader first needs to state everything very clearly in terms of what tasks need to be completed, break things down into smaller little portions, guide those employees through. So, the employees are following kind of a step by step plan to get to their goal. So, that's the high task orientation side of things. And they need to also have a high relationship orientation because the followers are going to get stressed because they don't have the proper skills to be able to do this. And they may not have the confidence either to think that they can do it. So the leader is both sitting there and kind of cheering them on. Yeah, you can do this. You keep working hard. You're going to do this. No problem. We'll get there. We'll get there. Um, and at the same time, trying to also coach them along. So when employees reach something, a step that they can't do, don't have the skills to do, that's when now that leader steps in and kind of coaches them, shows them how to do it. And once they can do it, poof, they're off and running. So that's selling. And finally, if followers are unable and unwilling, the best strategy here is leaders need to give clear and specific directions. Basically, they're using their power of authority and telling the workers, "This is what we're doing." So you're now more using authority than relationships to motivate your followers. So if we look at that visually, we can see here. Um, We've got on the vertical axis relationship behavior from low to high, and on the horizontal task behavior low to high. Well, here we can see on the low end of relationship behavior and task behavior is delegating. This is when employees are both able and willing. Once again, if we've got a low task behavior, but we have to increase our relationship behavior for the participating style, this is when our employees have the skills, but they're reluctant to do it. They're unwilling. So we need to increase our relationship behavior as a leader. If you've got your employees are unwilling or unable, but they're willing, you've got to work really hard as a leader. You have to have high task behavior to guide and scaffold your followers through all the steps to reach the goal. And you have to have high relationship behavior to kind of cheer them on and motivate them and inspire them to reach beyond their potentials. And then finally, here, if we've got unable and unwilling followers, then we're using our position of authority and we're telling them we're working harder on scaffolding the task behavior, but we're not really focusing on the relationship behavior. Instead, we're using our position of authority to make them uh, willing to continue on. So that was Hersey and Blanchard. And the final one is path goal guidelines or path goal theory. And path goal theory just states that the leader's job is to provide followers with the information, support, or other resources necessary to achieve their goals. Basically, this is the leader's job. Clarify the path to employee goals and clear that path of any roadblocks. So, the best guidelines here for path goal theory to be effective. Number one, you want to determine the outcomes that subordinates want. So, subordinates, people are different, and so they have different needs and different wants. So, you have to figure out what those needs and wants are. So, maybe the employees want good pay, maybe they want job security, maybe they want interesting work, or maybe they just want autonomy to do their own do the job their own way. Once you've figured out what your employees or subordinates want, you go to step two, which is reward individuals with their desired outcomes when they perform well. Okay, you said you wanted job security. Well, you do really well and you reach your goals, and you're going to have job security. Perfect. Number three, be very clear with expectations. You need to let individuals know what they need to do to receive the rewards. So, the path to the goal. So, you lay out the path the employees need to follow to achieve their goals. And you need to remove barriers that prevent high performance. Maybe an employee needs additional training. Maybe employees are hitting roadblocks because managers in other areas are causing barriers from them reaching their goals. In which case, the leader needs to get out in front of that and try and clear those roadblocks. And finally, express confidence that individuals have the ability to perform well. So, still back to that relationship side of things, leaders need to always be trying to motivate their followers. Path goal theory also identified four leadership styles and when they're best used. And the first leadership style is directive, and this informs subordinates of expectations and gives guidance when needed. So, this is best used when individuals have difficulty doing tasks or the tasks are ambiguous. So, we've got some tasks that individuals are having trouble performing. Well, you want to continually let the followers know of the expectations of them and give them guidance on how they can achieve those expectations. So once again, you're trying to clear out those roadblocks by giving them guidance and really laying out good task structure for them to follow. The second leadership style is supportive. And this is friendly and approachable, shows concern for the status and well being and needs of the subordinates. So we're back to the relationship oriented leader here. This is best used when individuals are under stress or otherwise show that they need to be supported. So you see that your employees are stressed out or that they're running into some issues that they can't clear on their own. They need some support. That's when you, as a supportive leader, come in and offer them support in order for them to reduce their stress or to help them through any roadblocks so they can get back on the path to their goal. The third style is participative, and this leader consults with subordinates, solicits suggestions, and takes suggestions into consideration. And really, it's best used when individuals need to buy into decisions. So we saw with Hersey and Blanchard, if your employees are able but unwilling, a participative style works best. So you get those employees that are unwilling on board in the decision making process, and that helps them to buy into the decisions and get motivated to reach their goals. And the final type is achievement oriented. And this would really count if we look back to Hersey and Blanchard when you have employees that are able and willing. So the achievement oriented leader sets challenging goals, expects subordinates to perform at highest levels, continuously seeks improvement in performance, and has confidence in the highest motivations of employees. And this is best used when individuals like challenges and are highly motivated. So if you've got a group of followers that has the skills and are willing to meet the challenges, then this achievement oriented leadership style works great. So, path goal theory, it looks at the leader behavior, and the leader can take one of these four different behaviors. It also looks at contingency factors like the environment around, so task structure, formal authority system in the work group, and the subordinates as well, or the followers. It takes them into consideration as well. Their locus of control, so how much they feel they have control over the situation, their level of experience, and their perceived abilities. And all of this you use in order to get your outcomes. So you can think of these almost as your barriers or some of their barriers that leaders are trying to clear away in order to make sure we hit our outcomes of performance and satisfaction. So that was a look at contingency theories. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to look at inspirational leadership. And here the focus is a leader as a communicator who inspires others to act beyond their immediate self interests. And there's really two contemporary leadership theories: charismatic leadership and transformational leadership. So we'll look at charismatic leadership first. And charisma comes from the Greek word for gift. And really, charisma is just a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he or she is set apart from ordinary people and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers or qualities. So, we've probably all seen people that have charisma and use that charisma, and when those type of people that are really charismatic and have good charisma, when they speak, people tend to listen to them, they're drawn to them. And we'll use examples of different charismatic leaders as we go through here. First off, though, we're going to look at House's charismatic leadership theory. And House's charismatic leadership theory really stated that followers make attributions of heroic or extraordinary leadership abilities when they observe certain behaviors. And four characteristics of charismatic leaders that were identified by House were charismatic leaders have a vision. They're willing to take personal risks to achieve the vision. They're sensitive to followers' needs, and they exhibit behaviors that are out of the ordinary. Traits and personality are related to charisma. So, what they're saying is people are either born with charisma or not. It's really hard to teach charisma. So, let's take a look here. We're going to look, number one was they have to have a vision. So, vision and articulation. Not only do they have to have a vision, expressed as an idealized goal that proposes a future better than the status quo, but they're also able to clarify the importance of the vision in terms that are understandable to others. And so, um, Steve Jobs, the former Steve Jobs, he had a vision of touchscreen phones. And he articulated this vision not only to his employees, but to the entire world. And a lot of people said it couldn't be done, but he had this vision. He was able to express this vision. So, that's an example of having a vision and articulation to really clarify that vision. Personal risk, willing to take on high personal risk, incur high costs, and engage in self sacrifice to achieve the vision. Um, Once again, we can take a look at Elon Musk or Richard Branson, and they want to privatize space travel. And they, once again, both had visions, both very capable of articulating that vision. They both have taken on huge personal risks and incurred high costs. And we've seen this year that they are now showing the fruits of their labor, showing that it is an achievable vision. The number three characteristic of charismatic leaders: sensitivity to followers' needs. They're perceptive of others' abilities and responsive to their needs and feelings. Um, and then finally, unconventional behavior. They engage in behaviors that are perceived as novel and counter to the norms. So, if we look at Steve Jobs with the touchscreen phone, everyone said that wasn't possible to do. Um, so, even though everyone said, nope, nope, can't do it, he still persevered and did it. Um, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, privatizing space travel. Everyone's like, way too expensive, can't be done. And they've both proven that it can be done. Might still be pretty expensive, but they've proven that it can be done. They've gone against the norm. So, how charismatic leaders influence followers? Well, leaders articulate an attractive vision. A lot of times in organizations, this is part of a vision statement, which is a formal long term strategy to attain goals. And most vision statements, they link the past to the present and the present to the future. You've heard Donald Trump, when he was the president of the United States, make America great again. So saying that, hey, America used to be great. We've kind of lost our way now. And with me as your president, we're going to go back to making America great again. Um, Number two, a leader communicates high performance expectations and confidence in follower ability. So you'll often hear charismatic leaders talk about how tough the road ahead is going to be, but that they have every confidence that with the great team that they have, they'll be able to break through those barriers and reach their vision. Number three, the leader conveys a new set of values by setting an example. So, charismatic leaders, uh, they want to uh, convey a new set of values, but they also walk that walk. So, talk the talk and walk the walk. Charismatic leaders do that. They walk the walk and they set an example for others to follow. And then finally, number four, leader engages in emotion inducing and often unconventional behavior to demonstrate convictions about the vision. So, charismatic leadership issues. Well, a vision is extremely important. And if you want a vision to really inspire followers, it has to be inspirational, value centered, realizable, and it has to be given with superior imagery and articulation. And you'll see a lot of motivational speakers use these same styles when they go into speaking engagements. They're very inspirational. They're very value centered. They normally relate it back to their life and what the struggles they had to encounter. And by doing that, they make it realizable for other people because, hey, if they can do it, you can do it. And they normally do this with superior imagery and articulation. Now, the one thing is, if a vision doesn't hit on all those keys, then you don't get the same follower readiness as you would if it does. So if it's not something that people think is realizable, especially the ones that need to be following this leader, then a lot of times a leader can be as charismatic as they want. The followers will not follow them. So it has to hit all of these key areas for it to be effective. Number two is charismatic effectiveness and situation. Um, Charismatic leadership can be really inspiring and can really help push a bunch of followers to really work above their own abilities and reach for a common goal. But it depends on the situation. Charismatic leadership is best used when times are tough or things need to change. If things are going really well in an organization and there's no real need for change, charismatic leadership isn't as effective because the situation just isn't conducive for charismatic leadership style, where we're trying to make huge inspirational changes. Things are going well, people are happy. Charismatic leadership is not going to be as effective. So, charisma works best when the follower's task has an ideological component. There's a lot of stress and uncertainty in the environment. The leader is at the upper level of the organization, and followers have low self esteem and self worth. This is when charismatic leadership works best. And there is a dark side of charisma. Ego driven charismatic leaders allow their self interest and personal goals to override the organization's goals. So, if we look at Germany after World War One, at the end of World War One, the Allied nations slapped Germany with a bill for all the damages caused during World War One, which was an insanely high bill. Um, and what it ended up doing is it led to the collapse of the German economy. They couldn't pay the bill, so the only way they thought they could pay the bill was to print off more money, which caused hyperinflation and made their currency worthless to the outside, to any countries outside of Germany. And there was extremely high unemployment rates, a lot of violence, there was a lot of poverty, and people were looking for something to believe in. And Hitler came with the Nazi Party with this vision of what Germany could be, and really preached on ideas that what they were going to do if they were in power was do everything in house in Germany. They weren't going to rely on outside countries for help. They would do everything in house and build Germany back up to a superpower and make Germany great again. And people followed that vision, and then quickly started to realize that that vision had a kind of dark component to it, that led to genocide and war, um, taking over other countries by force to try and gain their resources. So, a whole bunch of bad stuff in Germany with the rise of the Nazi power, but really the conditions were perfect for a charismatic leader to step up. It just happened to be a charismatic leader who had a very unethical way of doing things, and really shows the dark side of charisma. Another really good example, although it's not based in an organization, was Charles Manson and his charisma he used to influence young teens into this crazy idea of trying to destabilize the US economy by starting a race riot and staging a race riot. And once again, dark side of charisma being used there. So charisma can be extremely effective, but if the charismatic leader has uh, a warped sense of justice or ethics and isn't being altruistic, it can lead followers down a very dangerous path. All right, let's look at beyond charisma, or what's known as level 5 leaders. And these are very effective leaders who possess the four typical leadership traits: individual capability, team skills, managerial competence, and the ability to stimulate others to high performance, plus one critical new trait. and that is a blend of personal humility and professional will. Level 5 leaders really they use all their charisma, and they make sure that their personal ego needs are focused towards building a great company. um, so when uh, Zappos was first created, Tony really was a level 5 leader in the early days. He just wanted to create a great company, and really went and tried a whole bunch of different things to get a great atmosphere people wanted to work in, and really have them do the job their own way. And when things didn't go as expected, he would take responsibility for failures. And when things went well, he gave the credit to the others for success. It was the team, it was the call center, spending hours upon hours on the phone with the same customer to make sure they were satisfied. That's what gave them their success, according to Tony. So, this blend of personal humility and professional will really helps to set level 5 leaders apart from just charismatic leaders. All right, let's take a look now at transactional and transformational leadership. As I said, transformational leadership is another type of inspirational leadership. Transactional leaders are leaders who guide or motivate their followers in the direction of established goals by clarifying roles and task requirements. So, transactional leaders, they focus on mostly task oriented components of the job. Transformational leaders inspire followers to transcend their own self interests for the good of the organization, and they can have a profound and extraordinary effect on followers. But what we've identified is that these are not opposing but complementary approaches to leadership. And the best leaders have a mix of both transactional skills and transformational skills. One type is not enough for leader success. You need to be able to be both transactional and transformational. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to look at characteristics of leaders. We're going to first look at transactional characteristics and then go up to transformational characteristics. And we'll see that where we start is at the least effective end, and we're going to go up to the most effective end. So, number one, the least effective is the laissez faire leader. And this is the leader that really doesn't do a lot. They abdicate responsibilities and they avoid making decisions because they don't want to be accountable for those decisions. So, a lot of times, these leaders will kind of slough off decisions and get input from other people. And then, if things go wrong, they say, hey, that wasn't my decision, that was theirs. Um, so, not a very effective leader. One step up from that is management by exception in passive form. And what we mean by passive form here is these managers only intervene if standards are not met. So standards don't get met, and then they're like, hey, why didn't standards get met? What can we do to make sure they get met in the future? But really, they only act if a standard's not met. If everything's going fine, they really have a hands off approach. Management by exception, active, is slightly different. These managers, they really or leaders, they really watch and search for deviations from rules and standards, and take corrective action as needed. Um, these tend to be micromanagers as well. They're always looking at everyone's work. They're looking over your shoulder how you're doing things. You deviate at all, you get slapped on the wrist, and uh, that's the corrective action to get you back on track. And then we progress again. Now we're at contingent reward. And contingent reward contracts exchange of rewards for effort, promises rewards for good performance, and recognizes accomplishment. So we're starting to get into more effective leadership characteristics. And this is at the top end of the transactional leader. So they say, hey, you do this, you get a reward. Um, if you do a good job, you get a reward. They'll also recognize accomplishments. Hey, great job on hitting our sales quota last week. Keep up the good work. From there, we go into transformational leaders. And so these are some of the characteristics. At the low end of the transformational leader is the individualized consideration. And this is the leader that gives personal attention to employees. They treat each employee individually, they coach and they advise. So, a lot of times they're really using that personal relationship and building those personal relationships with the employees. From there, we can go a step up to intellectual stimulation. And this type of a transformational leader promotes intelligence, rationality, and careful problem solving. A lot of times, they'll get a participative style involved and get employees involved in the process to come up with a well crafted solution to an issue. Then we go to the inspirational motivation. These leaders communicate high expectations, they use symbols to focus effort, and they express important purposes in simple ways. So we're getting into that charismatic side of things. And then finally, idealized influence. These leaders provide vision and a sense of mission. They instill pride and they gain the respect and trust of their employees and coworkers alike. So we can see the full range of leadership model here. On our uh, vertical axis, we go from ineffective to most effective. And on our horizontal, we go from passive to active. So we start off, as we saw, laissez faire. Then we go to the management by exception, both passive and active. And then contingent reward. And then though that's what makes up the transactional side. And then we really get to effective and active solutions in the transformational side of things with individualized consideration, intellectual stimulation, and then inspirational motivation and idealized influence as the most active and effective leadership. So once again, though, having a good mix of this with managers. So if you've got a manager who is good at the contingent rewards and uses maybe a little bit of management by exception, but also uses inspirational motivation and maybe even intellectual stimulation, that's going to be a good leader. Someone who uses multiple different characteristics. Now we'll switch gears again and we'll look at, okay, let's get outside of the formal role and go to more informal roles. And mentoring is the best example of this. Mentoring is really a senior employee who sponsors and supports a less experienced employee who's known as a protege. And mentors, they take these people under their wing, these proteges, and they try and show them how things are done in an organization. They try and advocate for them, and really they try and mold these proteges kind of in their own image and have them try and rise through the ranks of the organization quicker. Good mentors present ideas clearly. They also listen to their proteges and they emphasize with them. Mentoring can take on two different functions. First is the career function. So that's where the mentor is coaching, assisting, and sponsoring an employee within the organization, trying to really catapult their career. And then on the other side is the psychosocial mentoring. And this is counseling, sharing, and acting as a role model. So this is when you sit down with your protege and you might listen to their issues and give them some advice on how to um, handle those issues, whether they be work related or personal related. um, Sharing stories about maybe times when the mentor uh, made a mistake, made an error, how they overcame it, or were in a tough spot and how they overcame it, and then acting as a role model, so showing your protege how to act as well. Mentoring relationships can be formal or informal. Formal ones are when organizations create a mentoring program to ensure that mentoring relationships are available for newer employees. And so, a new employee comes in, they enter the mentoring program, they're then paired with a senior employee. These formal relationships, they're not as effective as informal ones. Um, when a senior employee isn't told that they have to mentor someone, but they just take someone under their wing and start to mentor them, those relationships are often way more effective. The formal relationships just aren't as effective because the mentor didn't necessarily choose their protege; they had a protege chosen for them. They may not have even wanted to really be a mentor. And so those formal relationships aren't nearly as strong as those informal ones. The mentoring relationship really needs to also benefit not just the protege, but the mentor as well. And it's really, really key that the mentors be committed to the process and protege input into the relationship is being given as well. Those are critical components for a good, healthy mentoring relationship. If the mentor is not committed to the protege and not really committed to showing them all the ropes, that can really hurt that relationship as well. If the protege is not giving input into the relationship, how things are going, what's worked, what hasn't worked, then it's just a one-sided street, and those relationships don't tend to work all that well. So now we're going to look at a couple of different type of leadership situations. And the first one is team leadership. And leading teams requires other skills outside of the regular leadership skills. For example, patience to share information, trust in others, the willingness to give up authority, and knowing when to intervene and when to let things be. Uh, Leading teams requires other roles as well. So, a team leader, they need to also liaison and with external constituencies. So, if you're working on a project in a team, the team leader needs to go outside of that team and be working on building relationships outside of the team and gaining support for that project as well. Team leaders, they have to be troubleshooters as well. When team encounters issues, they have to look down and kind of go through, okay, what's working, what's not working, why is it not working, what do we need to check or figure on, or what do we need to tweak to make sure that we get going again and we get back on track. Team leaders definitely need strong conflict management skills. A little bit of conflict, as we'll talk about in the upcoming weeks, a little bit of conflict within a team known as functional conflict is really good, But once conflict turns dysfunctional, it can kill a team's performance. And team leaders also need to be coaches to the other team members. So, a lot of different skills needed in team leadership, and we'll look at that as well in upcoming chapters. Another type of leadership is online leadership. And online leadership really depends a lot on identification based trust, which is it's a leadership that's based on a mutual understanding of each other's intentions and appreciation of each other's wants and desires. So online leadership is kind of really been forced upon us in the last couple of years because of COVID, and so you need it's really important if you're in a online environment and you're a leader. You need to make sure that everyone understands what's at stake, and you have to try and gather everyone uh, to reach towards the same goals. And if you can do that, then you have identification based trust. So you understand each other's intentions and appreciations of each other's wants and desires. You all want to be successful. Here's how we're going to do that. And that's how you start to build some trust in an online environment. Some skills that you definitely need as an online leader. Well, number one is negotiations can be hindered because parties express lower levels of trust. So, as an online leader, you have to find a way to really gain the trust of the followers. Uh, Even in a team setting, if you're working online towards a common goal, um, once again, you still have to negotiate with your team members and get everyone on board. And the best way to do that is through really promoting and gaining trust, not just the employees of you, but you of all the other parties of the team as well. Good leadership skills include the ability to communicate, support, trust, and inspire through electronic communication, and that can be very, very difficult. Um, and that brings me to point number three here. You have to be accurately able to read emotions in others' messages. Um, if you think about uh, text messages, you sometimes can't always convey the proper tone or the proper underlying message in a text message. And the people interpreting those messages might interpret it differently based on something as simple as the mood they're in. So, electronic communications are critical for online leadership. And if you've ever been texting with someone and you sent a text and someone's taken it totally another way than what you meant, um, that's what we mean by accurately being able to read emotions in others' messages. Um, Sometimes we let our own emotions cloud the actual message that's being sent, and we'll misinterpret it. And when we do that, we can have miscommunication issues, which can lead to actual dysfunctional conflict. So you have to be really careful. And so, the biggest skill that online leaders need outside of being able to build trust and respect with all the parties is writing skills. Writing skills are likely to become an extension of interpersonal skills. All right, so we're almost done the chapter. We're just going to look at contemporary issues in leadership, and then we'll be done. So, we'll start off with authentic leadership. Authentic leaders, these are people who know who they are, know what they believe in and value, and act on those values and beliefs openly and candidly. And their primary quality is trust. People trust them because they're so authentic. They know who they are, they know what they believe in and value, and they act in those even in the face of adversity. So, how do you build trust? Well, authentic leaders build trust by sharing information, encouraging open communication with all their employees, and sticking to their ideals even in the face of adversity. So go back to Apple with the touchscreen phone. Um, Steve Jobs went on and did big seminars on the fact that they were going to introduce a touchscreen phone. So he was sharing information not just with his employees, but with the entire world. This is something we're going to do. It's going to be a reality. Even in the face of all the adversity of all the experts saying the technology doesn't exist, we can't do this isn't going to work, he stuck by his beliefs and stuck by his ideals and ended up being successful in creating the first iPhone. Um, that's an authentic leader, someone who's sharing their ideas, sticking to their values and beliefs, and not wavering even in the face of adversity. If we look at ethical leadership, well, ethics and leadership intersect. And I'm sure we've seen this and seen many real life examples of how leaders sometimes, by using their leadership style, they encourage unethical behavior and they may not even be aware of it. But ethics and leadership are very intertwined. Transformational leadership has huge ethical implications because they change the way followers think. And we've already talked about some of the examples, whether it be, Charles Manson, whether it be Hitler, um, and we can see this within organizations as well. If you've got a transformational leader in charge of an organization, and yet they're doing things that are unethical, well, followers will still be likely to follow them and do those unethical behaviors as well. So it's really important that transformational leaders uh, keep ethics in mind when they're being transformational and when they're changing their followers' thinking and they want their followers to do things. They need to keep ethics front and center. Charisma has ethical implications. Unethical leaders use their charisma to enhance power over followers, directed towards self serving ends. Um, Donald Trump, he tended to use that a lot during his presidency, and it led to a lot of rioting and even an assault on the White House. So, um, charisma can be very powerful and get people to do things they normally wouldn't do. Ethical leadership reduces interpersonal conflict and increases organizational citizenship behavior. So, if you have a leader who is very ethical and now people are following that leader, they're less likely to have interpersonal conflicts because they're following the ethical leadership style of their leader, and they're more likely to engage in these organizational citizenship behaviors, which are behaviors outside of the employee's job descriptions that they just pick up on. So, you know, a new employee comes in, they're doing a task for the first time, they don't really know how to do it. Maybe a senior employee goes over and says, "Hey, this is how you do this," and shows them, coaches them through that task. Wasn't part of their job description, but it's something they took upon themselves to help better not just that person, but the organization. That's an organizational citizenship behavior. Ethical leaders or leaders of any type really need to set high ethical standards, and they need to model them if they want ethical leadership within their organization. Socialized charismatic leadership is when leadership conveys values that are other centered versus self centered by leaders who model ethical conduct. And really, there's four cornerstones to a moral foundation of leadership: truth telling, always tell the truth; promise keeping, always keep your promises; fairness, any decisions, especially if they're perceived as negative, must be enacted fairly; and respect for the individual. And that means respecting each and every employee and having those employees then respect each other in turn. Finally, we get to an extreme version of ethical leadership known as servant leadership. Servant leaders go beyond their self interest and focus on opportunities to help followers grow and develop. They don't use power to achieve ends, even if they are in a position of power. They would much rather emphasize persuasion, and they accept stewardship and actively develop followers' potential. And it results in higher levels of commitment to supervisors, higher self efficacy with employees, and a better perception of justice. And some servant leaders on a global stage, uh, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, all examples of individuals in uh, leadership positions that use their leadership in order to try and influence others to be better. And that's chapter 11 on leadership. As always, I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned from it. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me or leave me a comment and I'll get back to you. So, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time when we look at our next chapter. So, thanks again for tuning in. Take care and have a great day.